A few of my favorite things, acrylics painting. So first thing that you got to do is make sure that you write down today's date. What's today's date? 13th. Thank you very much. Okay. So make sure that you write down in your sketchbook a few of my favorite things, because later on when you ask me, what are we working on? What are we doing? I'm going to tell you to check your notes. So you want to make sure you know which notes we're working with. We are going to be working with acrylic paint. Really the only thing that you're doing left with watercolor is that landscape. Okay, so we're going to be dealing with a couple concepts, or a couple different things. The first of which is a pattern. Who could tell me what a pattern is? Like, how would you describe a pattern? If somebody doesn't know what a pattern is, what would you tell them? Okay, yeah, making an image over and over again, right? Repeating an image. Okay, so that's the first thing I want you to write down, because that's one thing that you're going to be working with, is you're going to be working with a pattern. So a pattern is a combination of qualities, and this is important that you write this down because it's qualities. It's not necessarily always the exact same thing. Qualities, acts, tendencies, images that form a consistent or characteristic arrangement. That's what's important, okay? And that's another thing too, is consistent arrangement. That's essentially a pattern. Because when you look up in these examples up here, you'll notice that what is the object being used to make a pattern here in number 1? An elephant, right? But is it the exact same elephant? No. One is blue, one is white. And because of their arrangement, in the sense of, facing tail to tail, head to head, it also creates a pattern in the brown. Does that make sense? Here, okay, what's the pattern? Leaves. Okay, but is it the exact same leaf? That's pretty close, but it's different sizes. The different bubbles inside of it. You see that? So it's not always the exact same thing, but they have similar qualities, and they're all green with white bubbles inside of it. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, to create a pattern, one of the key words that Desiree said was repeating. So that's something important that we need to remember with this, because you're not only going to be creating a bit of a pattern, but you're also going to be repeating. So how would you tell somebody what repetition is without using the word repeating? How would you define that for somebody? That's a little bit tougher, isn't it? Right? Okay, so repetition. Pretty simple. Okay, image of the same object or thing over and over again. Okay, same object and thing over and over. Okay, so there we have an example of Andy Warhol on the left. Here we have preparation for one of my favorite fall things, caramel apples, apples on sticks, and then Campbell's soup cans. By the way, anybody see the relationship between Andy Warhol and the Campbell's soup can picture? What was Andy Warhol very famous for? Thank you very much, Vinny. Yes, the Campbell's soup can paintings. So, just a little inside joke there. Moving on. Okay, so here's what you're going to be doing. We're going to be working with Wayne Thiebaud. Okay, Wayne Thiebaud is a currently living artist, but he was very famous during 60s and 70s. Okay, so I want you to write his name down. Wayne Thiebaud. Okay. He is an American painter whose most famous works are of everyday objects. And that's important. Okay, that's what I want you to remember. That he is an American painter and he dealt with everyday object. The mundane. Okay. He's associated with the pop art movement because of his interest in objects of mass culture, although his works executed during the 50s and 60s slightly predate the works of the classic pop artists. Some refer to him as kind of a predecessor to the pop artists because he was dealing with stuff of the everyday, or also known as mundane objects, but he was elevating them to fine art. He was elevating them from the mundane to the exquisite. Okay? And since they were the mundane, everyday objects, that created our popular culture. So that's one thing. Those are the things that I want you to remember about him, is that he's associated with pop art, his interest in objects of mass culture. Those are the key things that I want you to remember about him. Okay? You can typically tell one of his paintings because it's of everyday objects, repeated, creating a pattern, but also he uses his paint pretty thick. So very heavy pigment and exaggerated colors to depict his subjects. Also, he uses a lot of dramatic contrast, which creates very well-defined shadows. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to write that. I just wanted you to see those kinds of things. So here you can see an example of him, the artist, being all, hey, what's going on for the camera? Okay, and then his cakes. Odds are you've probably seen his paintings, and you probably didn't even know it was him. So now you know. Moving on. Okay. When we look at, what's his subject here? What subject is he working with? Lipstick. Pretty easy, right? So how does he use the color? Do you think the color is very realistic? No. It's a little bit more expressive. Okay? It isn't always just about making the objects exactly as they are, but rather trying to make them convey something about the objects. Why do women use lipstick? Any ideas? Okay. Yeah, to show, so sometimes they use it to make themselves look better, moisturize their skin, draw attention to the lips. Yeah, those are some of the reasons. So, hence, dramatic color, dramatic value, something pretty interesting. Okay? Here, how does Thiebaud use repetition in a positive way? What is he creating by repeating the hot dogs? What principle of art does he create by repetition? Starts with a V. Variety is actually a principle. He's not necessarily using variety here. He uses variety here considerably more because variety is different elements of art, like a lot of them, to create a cohesive painting. So here he's repeating. He's got color, line, shape, space. Here, what do you think? There we go. Thank you, Kennedy. Yeah, it's creating more visual movement. Okay, so it kind of our eye draws from the left all the way to the right by repeating the hot dogs. Really quickly, who knows where these hot dogs are from? Oh, come on, you gotta know your hot dogs. You're in Chicago. They're New York style hot dogs. You can tell by the actual hot dog length. Anyway, sorry, little tidbit of information. Moving on. Now, are these objects identical? No, they're not, just like Jada said. Okay, but what's the overall idea or theme of these objects? What? Ice cream, right? That's the overall theme. Notice also the placement of these objects. Notice how they're at a slight diagonal and then a drop down. Notice the heights. This is all intentional. He creates different heights, which is creating a sense of visual movement. Okay, does that make sense? Look at the use of space. Nothing is really centered. Okay, moving on. How is this a dynamic composition? Dynamic meaning what? What do you think I mean by dynamic? Okay. With dynamic, what I'm referring to is interesting. Okay. How is this an interesting composition? Okay, there's nobody there. Okay, so basically the artist puts us as the customer because there's nobody else there. Okay, yeah, well, no, his use of space. Absolutely, Vinny, I think you're correct. His use of space is actually making it very interesting. Okay, so those are the kinds of things to consider. You look at, for example, how he utilizes the subjects, how he kind of groups them, okay, where he places them. Things aren't just horizontal and vertical, but they've got diagonals. How he repeats objects, okay. That starts to make things very interesting. Moving on, okay. Shadows here. I'm gonna skip over this one. There's not. I want to get to other things. So here's what we're gonna do. I want you to write this stuff down, okay. These are the subject parameters. So underline is the very important stuff that you guys need to know. in terms of subject parameters, plan your composition, and the painting parameters. So remember, this is what you're going to need to be doing. Next, we went through our categories. We came up with 3 categories as a class, and you gave me examples of things that can be brought in to represent those different categories. Now, your job is to develop a category of your own and objects you can bring in and bring those in, just per the other things. Here's some examples that students brought in. What's the category of these two sets? Yeah, pretty easy, right? So there's nothing. Now, these 2 students, by the way, were sitting on opposite ends of the classroom, and they came up with the same category, but different objects to represent that. Okay, and this is the image that they used for their composition. Okay. These are, what do you think the category is here? This is a tough one. Okay. Yeah, I hear juice, and it's kind of tough, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's actually their childhood. Okay. The one on the left is this student's family actually drank out of these mason jars, all their lemonade, juice, and whatever, and he remembers that from his childhood. Okay. And then the one on the right is the girl used these ladders when she was learning things. Okay. So, and she still has them. So that's the overall category of this is childhood. Okay. Now here I'm showing you an example of objects on the left with the finished painting on the right. What's the object? Potato. Potatoes. And look at the painting. I mean, what do you think? Do you think the painting's pretty interesting? I don't know about you, but it's like if somebody told me I'm going to do a painting of potatoes, I'd be like, okay. But look at that. That's pretty interesting. Right? So it's not, yes. She's actually a junior right now. She did this last year. Yeah, she did this as a sophomore. Yeah, she's very talented. She's in our AP class now. So there you could see something very mundane made very interesting. Here's another example. Student objects on the left, student painting on the right. This, by the way, was done by a freshman. What? Crazy. Like, I just looked at Desiree's face. She's like, bull crap. Yeah, no, it's seriously, it's amazing. Not going to lie. Now, I'm showing you amazing examples, so this is pretty cool. But I'm going to be showing you guys how you could do this, okay? But that's what I want you to think about, is different objects, things that are meaningful and interesting to you. Does that make sense? Okay? And then you're going to have to bring in those objects. As you can see, we did take pictures of the objects, okay, and they used them as reference. And so we composed with the picture, and then we wind up enlarging and painting using underpaint. Okay? So tomorrow what I'm going to do, well, before I move on to this, are there any questions about what I'm asking you to do and bring in? No? Okay. So tomorrow I'm going to be showing you underpainting an Old Master's trick, and then we're actually going to start with an activity. Okay? Any questions? Beautiful.